Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. My name is Richard Simon. This is the October 2025 episode of Cloud State of Play. Now, you might be wondering, what's happened to Cloud State of Play? We've kind of gone into cyberspace or something. We've not gone slightly mad. Yeah, I think we're doing well. I think we're moving up in the world. I think that's what's happened. So actually, not quite. So we've kindly been given access to the Tech Industry Forum's studio and cyberspace effects, as you can probably see behind us. Paul and I can just see a green screen behind us. That's all we can see. But you guys are seeing the whole thing. So we're very grateful to the Tech Industry Forum for lending us their space and their cyber effects as well. So thank you very much for David Terra to actually allow us to have the space. We're also very thankful to Disruptive Live. So that's the actual studio that we're in. So they've done a great job in actually helping us out today to do this episode. We thought we'll kind of make something different for this particular episode. So again, thank you to Disruptive Live for that. So more on the Tech Industry Forum and Disruptive Live in the description of the video. You guys can check that out later on. Now, here's somebody who's decided to follow me, perhaps somewhat begrudgingly, into cyberspace. It's the authentic Paul Bevan.
Hello, nice to see you. And yes, slightly grudgingly, I had to traipse all the way down from rural Northamptonshire to the depths of London, but no.
So you've swapped one green for another, basically.
Yes, I've swapped one green for another, but
the green trees for a green backdrop.
Happy to be here. And as a Londoner, it's nice to be back home.
Excellent. So how are you doing? You've been good?
Yeah. Keeping busy, even though I say I'm retired, stroke not retired.
Okay. So have I impressed you with our setup? What do you think?
Oh, I think this is cool. Very cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I know these guys well. We worked with them in the past, a few years ago. So when I was still at Blur.
Ah, fantastic. Brilliant. Okay. So, so I won't introduce Paul as being part of Law Research anymore. That's something I don't have to remember because I always used to mess that. I have to mess up all that titles for you. But anyway, so we have, again, 3 great topics for you this month, guys. So the first topic is the fall and rise of Oracle. So this is the a great report that we've had from Arehte Research, and they've given us access to use their report for this particular topic. So very grateful to Arehte Research. And yeah, Oracle's kind of seem to be riding the Gen AI sort of wave right now with the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And yeah, they've come a long way since the days of competing with IBM on databases in the early 2000s. That's what I remember. Anyway, so so we'll be looking at kind of where Oracle is, what they've been up to recently, and whether that kind of model of what they're doing, their approach is sustainable. So we'll see. The second topic is Gartner, and it's a workloads relationship to infrastructure. Somebody's actually come up about a report. They've produced a report in regards to that. They kind of take an IAM angle to that. So that's the kind of the approach they see have. They say they have the 4 distinct entities within that sort of framework. There's a nice picture of that, and again, we'll drop the description, or drop the link in the description for you in regards to that. So we're going to have a look at that particular report from Gartner as well, and see whether that actual workload relationship is valid there. And then the third one is the big one. It's the AWS outage. What the F happened? So we're going to be covering the outage. We're going to be talking about that. And I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of essentially kind of the sequence of events. And then we'll talk a little bit more about maybe availability, high availability, and what should the enterprises do to kind of try and mitigate these sort of risks that they might encounter when they're obviously running in a public cloud. We'll also look at some of the reporting that has come through from various sort of LinkedIn influencers and other people who've kind of put out lots of different reports in regards to that. But yeah, rather than kind of go into sort of the details of that, we'll look at it from a factual point of view and see whether there's any kind of merit in any of those reports and blogs that people have been putting out in regards to the outage. So we'll give our verdict on that for you as well. So those are our topics for this particular month, for October. Now, before we dive in, here is a quick channel message for you. Did you know that 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet to this channel? Come on, guys, we can do better, surely. So please hit subscribe and the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it really helps me to keep making more videos for you. All right, back to the therapy session. Okay, so our first topic, as we said, is the fall and rise of Oracle. Now, as we said, we had the article from Arehte Research. So again, thank you for them to supply us with that. I think they called it the bare metal jacket was their thing. So clearly, kind of focusing, Paul, on the sort of the OCI side of it and the sort of the GPU as a service type of offering, right?
Yeah, I think it was all coming from, these big announcements we've had recently from OpenAI and Stargate and around that, and how Oracle are now going to be providing a fairly significant amount of what they call OCI capability in terms of their existing infrastructure and building infrastructure. Oracle are going to have to invest a lot of money in infrastructure, but again, it's part of the wider AI circle of funding that seems to be going on. But the report was interesting in the sense that it looked at Oracle's position, and I suppose to cut to the chase, felt that actually they were probably overstating the upside for them in some of this. And the reason for that is, the reason they called it full metal jacket is that effectively what they're saying is that during the training phase of AI, Oracle will effectively be, AI as AI training as a service.
Yeah.
They will just be putting in GPUs and many thousands of GPUs and using those to train, but that there's really very little upside for Oracle as you move into the inferencing phase. And we're going to have a sort of discussion around that, but it was really intriguing in the sense that Arehte didn't see this as being a threat to the big three cloud providers.
Yes, indeed. So there were some key insights which we'll have a look at. Obviously, again, we'll make the report available to you guys so you can have a look at it as well. But there was just a few points that I picked up on, so I'll kind of maybe throw this at you and then see what you think. So I think one of the things they said was the meteoric growth of Oracle's cloud infrastructure business and the tightening of its relationship with OpenAI are raising questions about competitive dynamics in the sort of whole hyperscale industry. So that was one thing. But then, as you said, they didn't really see it as a threat to the hyperscalers. So whatever Oracle's doing, maybe it's kind of being opportunistic with the approach.
I mean, their take was it, and I have to say I probably agree with most of it, is that Oracle don't have the underlying ecosystem and services backup and breadth of services that the other three have put together over the course of many years. And therefore, at best, they're going to be, yes, they'll generate income to themselves in terms of running the GPUs, but they won't be able to leverage that because they simply don't have that services, that services and ecosystem side that the others have, built huge ecosystems to take advantage of this. So there was very little upside. So basically what they're saying is they're going to be in a low margin business. And then when the training starts to wind down, because it will go into a phase where, you're tweaking models rather than generating huge new models, is that the inferencing phase they may well lose out on.
I think one interesting point again from the report from Arehte Research was that they said they have obviously jumped over IBM in terms of the market share for their public cloud for OCI, but Microsoft still has a huge role to play when it comes to OpenAI because they have a I think first right of refusal or something.
First right of refusal.
Right.
Yeah.
So how's that going to kind of work out for them?
Well,
that's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, but again, if you know, if things start to go west with the sort of circular funding, and we've been talking, there's been plenty of talk about, is this a bubble and is it going to burst?
Right.
And NVIDIA came out with some good figures the other week, and you can see a lot of people sort of wiping their brows and going, oh, thank God for that, we've got decent figures from NVIDIA. But there is a certain level of concern. I think the view is, certainly from Arehte, what it seemed to be saying is that if things do go west, Oracle are going to be left holding the baby. Microsoft can do a very quick, shift of the problem.
Yes.
Whereas Oracle won't be able to do that quite as much.
Indeed. And then again, in the report they said, and I quote, in its communication with investors, Oracle appears to be conflating inference with training. And its new GPU rental business with existing OCI capabilities. Now, we've seen this again before. Others have kind of generalized, what they're doing right now with kind of what's happened before, what they've been doing, prior to that as well.
Yeah, this is all part of the nervousness, I think, in the markets that some of the figures that are being put up there, if you really dig into it, there isn't the genuine sort of what I call financial governance accounting that you can live and die by. The only plus point being is that the banking system doesn't seem to be as much at risk this time as it was maybe back in 2008.
Right.
So if there is a crash, but people like Oracle could lose out badly.
Yeah. So I think it's I think it's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
To be honest, and what I've not seen, and we've seen, we've said this umpteen number of times already, is who's going to be using this? Who's this aimed for? Is it enterprises, or is it people who actually want to do the research on those GPUs?
So, at the moment, obviously, it's the people who want to do the research on the GPUs. That's where it is at the current time, and that's where Oracle are going to make its first tranche of money. Fine.
Yeah.
The one interesting point for me, and it wasn't in the report, but it came out in something else that you shared with me, which was an article that was on LinkedIn that obviously we'll share, that was about the Oracle database 26AI. Now, that's interesting because that's very much being positioned as a unified data platform.
Right.
And one of the things that I think it was the Arehte report put, is that inferencing needs to go where the data is. Now, obviously, there are key players like Snowflake and Databricks and others who are going to be in that. But I think, as you've found in your own work, that actually getting a single, integrated approach to how do we use the data in an inferencing, and where do we get it from? How do we stream it? How do we make it work? There are so many component parts that the unified data platform idea, with multiple models all within the same platform, seems to be a coming thing. And I think Oracle are not betting the house on that. They haven't said it in those sort of terms. But I'm looking at, maybe, particularly with healthcare, their purchase of Cerner, 3 years ago now, 4 years ago?
Yep.
And the growth of spending on health, but also AI applications in health, that they may see that, Oracle 26AI and whatever follows on beyond it as a unified data platform is the way to go. Now, I think that's a difficult play for them, personally. I think the technology is good. I can't remember whether it was Gartner or Forrester did a report on these unified data platforms, and Oracle came out top. So, from that point of view, looks like they, from a technology perspective, but as we all know, trying to get an integrated approach or an integrated tool set, if you like, is quite difficult when there's already existing players in the market, like Databricks, like Snowflake and others. It'd be very difficult to shift.
Yeah, and I think, the key insights that I picked up from Arehta's report, it said, and again I quote, Oracle's rapid scaling of cloud infrastructure is raising questions over competitive dynamics, as we said. So that was in the kind of focused in the area of how they would interact in the public cloud, because they're, normally their shares been extremely small. It's kind of in the sort of IBM realm. So that will be interesting, whether they, as you said, do they have the services? Can they rise up to the challenge to offer that other side of, AI, not the training side, but the inference side?
Again, the Arehte report seemed to suggest that they were nearer in sort of stature and status to the other neo clouds that are around. If you think about the CoreWeaves of this world, and the N-scales coming in, that it's nearer to that. So I'm not sure Oracle will enjoy that, but that's where Arehte seem to be, putting their, and they're more like sort of financial analysts. They sort of took this one apart financially, and they're saying, we've got a fairly neutral stance on Oracle at the moment. So we wait to see.
Sure. And then the other point that they made in the report as well is they said we see Oracle as a bare metal GPU, which is kind of what we are, business rental business, which is what we were kind of saying. So they lack the services, as we mentioned, and then continue to model Oracle sort of getting around 10 gigawatts of capacity, I think, by 2030. They said so. That's kind of what they'll probably aiming for total capacity in their data centers, driven primarily by demand from training computes.
Yeah, but obviously that puts a pressure on Oracle to put that infrastructure in place. So they've actually got they've got a certain level of cash that they can call on, but nowhere near the cash reserves that the other big three have got. So they're going to have to go out to the markets to finance that. So again, it's they're going to have to leverage their business a little bit, or more than a little bit, to ensure that one plays. Yeah. And of course, I suppose that whether it's a mitigation or whether it's a risk, I'm not quite sure at this stage, is everybody wants all those gigawatts. And at the moment, that is potentially one of the bottlenecks, alongside water availability, etc. In terms of being able to ensure that everything that's in the air at the moment can actually turn itself into reality on the ground in terms of new data centers.
So they may have to get a ticket and get in line, basically.
Yes.
For those resources, right? Just because they kind of done a deal with OpenAI or so on, that doesn't mean that they're kind of a number one player now.
Yeah, there's a sort of switch, in that towards, it doesn't matter how much money you've got. It's if you're actually already got lined up the power availability, you'll jump the queue. Right,
exactly. Okay, so we'll see what happens with that. It'll be an interesting one. So going into next year, I think that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Right, so let's move on to our second topic, which is the Gartner Workloads relationship to infrastructure. Now, this is by one of the analysts, Eric Wallstrom. So again, we'll drop a link in the description for you on that. I've actually picked it up on LinkedIn. I can't remember if somebody notified me about it or it just came into my feed. But he's done a chart, and the chart is kind of depicting the four, I think, elements, as he called them, of kind of how he sees certain components when we're designing and when we're building cloud systems. And these four components touch on the identity and access management, the IAM sort of layer. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with that, and I couldn't find what was, because he didn't give an explanation as to why those four elements. So he talked about containers, he talked about virtual machines, I can't remember what the other ones were.
Applications and servers.
And services, there you go, yeah. So, but he said, things like virtual machines need IAM, and because he classed them in that sort of same way, which is a little bit odd. I didn't really sort of understand that. The chart was, I think, okay. I think the charts, and again, we'll try and show that for you on the screen or a description. You can see it in the description of the video. So I thought that was fine, but a lot of this stuff is academic. We talk about RBAC LDAP and Active Directory and all that kind of thing. And now obviously Entra ID with the likes of Microsoft Azure, AWS's IAM. That's certainly in there for authentication and authorization, right? So it just seemed to be kind of mentioning something that we already know. I didn't see anything differentiating in terms of what he was saying.
No, the one, and I'm not an expert on IAM or security.
Did you get this wrong? I don't know.
I don't know. The thing that confused me as much as anything else was he was talking about workload and then the load that was putting onto operations, having to deal with all this.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, well, workload itself, it's the complexity of the system and the interactions, and again, not being an expert on what you have to, give accreditation to and how you have to sort of make sure it's secure, etc., and give it access. And clearly, the more you automate systems and the more you connect microservices together, there's going to be more and more of those links. But to me, IAM was very much about, ensuring that the entry points were secure, with credentials, and where that application then had to run through the system, if it then passes information to another system, how does that get credentialed, etc., all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But it sort of struck me that this wasn't about workload. It was about It was about complexity of...
Right. So let me quote this bit, because this was from the LinkedIn post that he put out. So he said, in summary, virtual machines, containers, services, and applications, as you said, are often connected and dependent on each other, while all needing distinct IAM strategies. Now, I mean, a virtual machine is not even gone up to the network layer yet, let alone, do anything in terms of security, apart from physical security, or virtual security, we should say, of the virtual machine. And that's being, that component, that object, that entity, whatever you want to call it, is being created by, whatever the platform, the hypervisor platform, whatever that is, or the cloud operating system that's running. So if it's in AWS, it's an instance. That's what we call it, basically. But again, it's a vessel. It's designed to be a vessel for running an operating system, which, yes, that will have identity access. So that will be at that layer. You would need it at the OS layer, but not at the VM layer. VM is kind of, it's emulating hardware. That's all it's doing. It's a games emulator, basically. You're emulating some hardware somewhere. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, I take your word for it, because that's beyond my sort of technical pay grade, I have to say, at this stage. So, but the only thing that resonated for me was when they started talking about agentic AI, which is that hairy topic.
Drifting a bit there, yeah.
Yeah, again, but then you can sort of get the sense that if one agent needs to talk to another agent, how do they ensure the handshake point that their credentials are right, their authorizations are right, etc. And again, not knowing the technicalities of the ins and outs, you can sort of get that if you're sharing information amongst agents, how the hell are you going to ensure that all the agents in the agentic AI workflow, have been accredited and authorized properly? Don't know.
So,
but that made sense, but the rest of it didn't.
I know, and I think that's a different matter.
Yeah,
that's a different problem. And I was at the GitLab event recently, and I had been advocating this with some other colleagues and friends. I'd been talking about it, and I said, with the advent of AI agents and kind of the potential sprawl that's going to cause and so on going into next year, I said we need an AI agent directory. You need some kind of a Active Directory type of thing, a service registry, an AI agent registry, in other words. So that's what I was advocating for. And at GitLab, that's exactly what they announced. They said that's what they're going to do. So that would mean then all agents would need to declare themselves and register themselves at the AI agent registry prior to being allowed to do anything. And if they're rogue or they're third party or slightly dodgy or something, then they're not going to work, basically. You know, the system will, the IAM system and the secrets manager will not allow them to actually operate. So I can appreciate it from that point of view. And we've, again, going back to IAM, you know, HashiCorp Vault has been doing that for a long time. We've had IAM capability, you know, within that. It's not necessarily geared for everything, but, you know, Entra ID from Microsoft, you know, in Azure, that's exactly what it does. It's essentially your AD in the public cloud. So all of that, I think, is fine, but for me, it was a bit academic. And then the entities that he chose, like a virtual machine, I couldn't really reconcile that with the software layers that he talked about in the services.
Yeah, and unless, you know, all the sort of services and all the IAM tools that you've been describing don't actually then, if you like, sign up to this architecture that they're trying to put together, then it is purely academic. You know, and do you need to have that? You know, again, I would, you know, I like a good architecture, you know, along with the best of them, but, you know, just doing it for the hell of it isn't particularly helpful. And for me, the whole term workload was wrong, because, you know, that's about the pressure you put on the underlying hardware and operating systems and all those sort of things, rather than the infrastructure and access management, which just seemed the wrong terminology.
And then again, it's not very clear what those, you know, what is a workload, and people kind of tend to have different views on that, right? And again, that's an issue as well.
You brought up one that was the cloud definition of a workload, which is, you know, basically anything that requires access to, you know, the hardware, the servers, the databases, etc.
Yes.
There was a very simple, and I think you can probably put it in the link that says, you know, this is physically about, you know, how you are stressing the underlying infrastructure.
Yeah. So we mentioned kind of HashiCorp Vault as kind of being, you know, a AIM-like, sort of having AIM-like sort of capabilities. But as we said, you know, AWS has IAM, and Azure, you know, has AD, it has Entra ID, as we said. So that kind of all provides that sort of, you know, fine-grained access to systems. And I think all of those, again, are on different layers. A VM is not on the same layer as a service when it comes to kind of security and, you know, identity and access management and things like that.
I mean, if Gartner are going to provide some sort of mapping of existing tool sets to their architecture, that might be quite useful.
True. Yeah. But it wasn't in that chart.
It wasn't in that chart.
I didn't see it in that chart.
No, it wasn't. That
was a very self-contained.
It was a very self-contained.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, right, in this part, you've got what you've just said, AWS have got this, Microsoft have got that, you know, and if you need to put it all together, that sits there, this one sits in the other, but, you know, I didn't see that.
And I didn't, and you're right, and I didn't see, there wasn't anything saying, you know, yes, they all need some kind of IAM, but they are at different layers, and here's what the layers would look like. Here's a VM over here, here's an app up there, type of, you know, I just didn't see that. It was a kind of a very self-contained, the chart that he's used is very self-contained.
I'd love to see in the future, maybe Gartner, if you're listening, do this, is give us an example of an end-to-end of what the IAM you're thinking about.
Correct, yeah.
Plays in that end-to-end, you know, from the application right through the, you know, from the point at which you or I go onto the keyboard and say, right, I want to go and do this, right the way through, and it would be, once you get that vision of how it works, I think people will start to make sense of the architecture. But as an architecture picture by itself, you're going, I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah, and I just found the four entities that he picked on, you know, containers and virtual machines, apps and services.
Apps and services made sense. To me, the layman, apps and services made sense.
Sure.
The other two didn't, because I didn't know quite how they would fit into that.
Yeah, and and containers normally don't, you know, they don't necessarily have their own identity in that way.
And they're very, I mean, the challenge with them, of course, is they're so ephemeral. Though,
Ephemeral, yeah, exactly.
You get rid of them and destroy them quickly and put another one in.
Exactly.
So I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, well, even the networking is different, because you're networking to a pod, which is where it's the logical unit of the pod that the containers sit in, and then that kind of does the I/O basically. So I just found that. Maybe it just wasn't explained very well. Maybe that was kind of the thing. But, again, we did a lot of research on things like vaults. I kind of looked into that and to see where that kind of sits in. And certainly the theme of authentication and authorization comes into IAM, so identity and access management. And it's not just identity for you and me, let's say, users on a system.
It's system.
It's components, it's entities, and so on as well. And that's fair enough. And there's plenty of those kind of tools that you can do this with anyway. You don't have to rely on like Vault or whatever the cloud provider's offering.
If that is to make sense, Gartner need to give those examples of where those tools fit.
Yeah. So on the authentication side, it's basically, are you a valid user? Are you a valid entity and object coming into the system and providing these credentials? That's essentially authentication. And then the authorization is, once you're in, what you're allowed to do, and more importantly, not allowed to do as well. And I think that's the kind of main aspects of that. And there are obviously, identity sort of entities and groups, and Vault does all of that kind of stuff. All the other tools, do that. And I'm sure the hyperscale provider tools, do that as well. So again, we go back to things like, RBAC and LDAP and so on that we've kind of been using in the data center. AWS IAM, Azure AD, Okta, all these tools allow you to actually do that. And I just couldn't get and again, this could be just our failing, but I just couldn't get the connection that he was trying to make with that.
Well, from our conversation beforehand that I was struggling with the connection. Really was.
Well, as our viewers know, Paul and I exchanged lots of WhatsApp messages offline. So all this stuff has been really considered and thought out, and we've come at it from different angles. So we could still be wrong, but it was just very, it was just a very kind of, I don't know, it just seemed to be a little bit insular in terms of kind of what it was.
Probably leave it there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So I think as we said, the kind of the sensibility, is there. We already know that. We understand kind of how, sort of IAM should work. I don't necessarily agree with that, with the 4 entities that he put, certainly not the way it was portrayed. And even the chart didn't really kind of seem to explain it in a sort of a level type of approach. So I found that quite strange. And then I think you kind of wanted to. Did you want to kind of lean into a little bit more about the workloads? Because you mentioned that. Well, what was your sort of?
I think it's probably not relevant now in this particular one, because
the whole thing is not really that relevant.
That's why I was struggling. To me, the whole workload issue for operations was getting a grip on where you're going to get bottlenecks in the system, getting to grips with, and we'll cover this in the next section too, where your potential problems might lie in terms of resilience and availability, all those sort of things come in. And the more complex the system, the harder that job gets. We've made it very complex now in terms of the way in which systems are put together and run globally across cloud and across the internet. So, and I'd started along that strand and realized that actually they were talking about something completely different in this particular article. So I'm not going to get into that. I don't think we've got the time to do that today. No,
I think we'll be here forever. Probably the studio needs their time back. So people want to go home. But the point is, I think if we need to stretch back into the data center, we have that capability. And again, all of these tools that we mentioned, they all have that ability. If you want a hybrid solution, a hybrid class solution, and you've got a relatively kind of dumb application that insists on Active Directory or whatever type of approach, you can do that. And these tools go back to the data center and they talk to Active Directory. So I really don't understand what the beef was with IAM. Poor IAM being picked on there, I think, a little bit harshly and unfairly there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I fundamentally disagree with the VM sort of aspect of it. That kind of just being arbitrarily sort of thrown in doesn't really, they don't, it just does not operate on the same level as containers and services, and certainly not at the apps. And we said it's it's a vessel, or as Chekhov from Star Trek might say, vessel, a nuclear vessel. So anyway, but yeah, so I think Gartner, we need a little bit more explanation on that. Maybe we'll see. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to our third topic, Paul. This is a big one. It certainly was a big outage.
Oh, so. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so it's the AWS outage. What the F happened? Now, the funny thing is, not to be outclassed, Microsoft Azure decided to fall over a week later.
Yep.
And then a week later after that, it was Cloudflare's turn.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think everybody wanted to join the AWS outage party. So maybe we should use that in the future, have an outage party kind of award or something for that. But yeah, give me your kind of take on what was sort of what you observed from it, and then I'll come in with some interesting influencer reports and posts.
I mean, the thing that surprised me, I think probably start with what surprised me, was that it affected as many services and applications globally from one region, i.e. the Northeast, in Virginia.
Yeah.
And that was a surprise until you started to get into the detail of how the whole thing is put together. And so, you're looking at where the problem first arose in the sort of DNS tables, and the way in which they interact with DynamoDB, to get the updates, etc. And whatever happened, whatever registry problem that they seem to have got at that point had such a knock-on effect. So it was the knock-on effect for me that was the most interesting and probably the most consequential for people to think about, because it took out EC2 instances. It basically took out, large swathes of DynamoDB capability. And I think the thing that I sort of took from it was that more customers than we have ever realized have potentially got single points of failure. Even if they think they've maybe got different availability zones within one region, it wasn't going to protect them. But even across regions, that was the interesting thing. It says, right, how do you stop that happening? And again, if you want an analogy, from what happened, and we can sort of read out exactly, what happened between the DNS servers and the load balancers,
which I will go into, a little bit more. Yeah, we'll go into that.
If you want to give a sort of real world example of what it looks like, and I was going to use the motorways, but it's probably more like if there's a dirty great big pile up in the middle of London, or they dig the roads up in the middle of London, what happens? All the traffic starts to back up. People then try and find other ways around it, and mess up all the other routes as well. And you could see this sort of thing happen, almost like if you were sort of hovering above AWS, Virginia plant, you could almost see these little sort of transactions all going, oh, I can't get through that one. I'm going to try that one over there, and I'm going to try that one. And so what people have not realized is that there are some choke points, and they just need to be aware of what those choke points are. And I know, from our conversations, that these will happen.
Yes.
These problems will happen. It's a very complex arena and very fast moving, and therefore these will happen. So then we'll come back to, what are the implications for businesses?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, there was certainly, I think, aspects of that caused, as you said, a lot of disruption. Now, whenever these things happen, as it was with the CrowdStrike outage last year, we tend to find out who the customers are. right? It's like a customer list. If anybody else, a competitor, wanted to know who's who and who's using, CrowdStrike as it was last year and AWS this year, now we know who's using them because they're all out. And the funny thing was, some of the banking services in Europe were knocked out.
That was really surprising.
So that was strange. So, sovereignty ahoy! What's going on there?
Yeah, and there's a sort of question that's not been asked is, how did you architect this in the first place?
Why are you going out all that way?
Why are you going out all that way? Now, if you go to the earlier days of AWS, they, more than Microsoft and Google, tended to route traffic back into the States and round again.
Yeah.
But they got over that because it was actually creating some level of latency that the other two weren't getting. So, and particularly if you'd looked at the way, Thousand Eyes can show you where all the routings happen.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting to see. And you're thinking, well, are these applications that were architected when that sort of routing went on and just haven't been updated?
Since, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. The interesting one was the hanging by a piece of string point for me was that the fact that AWS's own services went down. Yeah. So their service, which got not necessarily connected to what customers are doing, also went down.
Yeah.
So you had kind of the Lambdas and whatever also failing. And I'm thinking, isn't your services on a kind of a back-end bus or something, running on a different bus than what you would present to customers? Isn't it architected in that way? That's a very strange way to, so
they're just using,
they're using the same service as everybody else.
It looks like it, and using certain, things. It seems to be the load balancers were the ones that got into trouble first.
Yes.
So whether they, yes, they thought they got all the back end, the application was away from what they were doing. But if there was a sort of network requirement or a load balancing requirement, it seemed to be going through that route. Where are the single points of failure? And I think you've always got to think. Are there going to be these single points of failure? Back to arguments we've had about, how expensive it is to completely, duplicate everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And maybe it's, the implication for businesses is you cannot outsource your response, if you like, the overall governance and responsibility for what you're doing in the cloud. But it does feel sometimes like they have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just flabbergasted by the fact that their own services went down as well. I mean, I would have thought customers can't get to that service, but not that service going down. Do you see what I mean? There's a subtle difference there between, my service has gone, my app has gone down, my business app has gone down because yes, they've screwed up our DNS, and there's nothing I can do in my own cloud environment, my world in AWS, because it's happening higher up than me. So I've got no control over it. My DNS is fine, and within my environment it's fine, but I need to go to the outside world, and then that's gone down. That's what AWS is caused. So that was what I would expect. So you go down from a customer side of things, but not the AWS service necessarily.
But this is where you were getting issues where people had thought about it and saying, well, I need to architect this, that if this particular DNS service gets into trouble, then I could switch to another one. And if you look at the report that came out of AWS, you could see that happening. But then, of course, they got latency issues, and as they tried to move across and replicate into because they had to take the tables and replicate them across into another one. You think, would you mirror those tables, for example? Maybe they hadn't done that, but again, you come back to this issue that says it's a very complex environment that you're putting together. Do you, Mr. Customer, understand exactly how you've architected that and where your risks lie? And that's the implication coming out. Because you and I have had this conversation that says, problems will happen. I was going to use another term. Problems will happen all the time because it's, human problems, just systems failing for whatever reason.
Yeah, and we've, like I said, I think we've said this before. We've embraced failure. We understand that systems in a cloud environment will fail. So we architect, around that or against that, right? It's trying to avoid that and mitigate the risks as much as we can. Whether it's, introducing things like, chaos engineering, for example, into your code, so that you can actually make your, systems and applications resilient. But then the environment itself, the cloud environment, you have a high availability, and that high availability as an enterprise, so you're not going to copy everything across. You're not going to have a replica in another region just twiddling its thumbs, just waiting for things to fail in your primary region. But you can potentially, using extremely sort of high-end cloud native services and capabilities, you can stand up an environment using serverless, for example, and other things that will, not 100% of the service back online, but it'll kind of give you something that will allow you to mitigate, and you can continue your service and taking your orders or whatever it is that your business is doing.
They're interesting. You say you can mitigate it and take your orders, and maybe it's not moving as fast. Certain, obviously, environments, financial trading for one, couldn't deal with that. Would have to have it almost completely mirrored and just fail over completely. And if you go back, in my past and even before your past, I think, you go back to the OLTP systems from the IBMs and Unisys of this world. They mirrored their systems, and it was, you had, this sort of embrace that they had, got it the sense that the minute your system went down, the mirrored system picked up exactly where it left off. And I've seen that demonstrated. So I've never understood in a cloud world how you do that, or whether you can do that quite in the same way without it being very complex and very expensive.
So people tend to do it, and I think this was, again, obviously a failure, because this was a fundamental kind of root failure of that entire region. Right? They do it in availability zones. They do it at the AZ level.
Yeah.
But the AZ is in the same region.
Exactly.
So that's no good.
Yeah.
But that allows them to be quick on the replication of the data, for example.
Yeah.
So rather than going outside and through the Atlantic trunk and whatever and getting over there to another region and doing your data back up there, they do it in another availability zone. The problem is, it's like a pyramid. At the top is the DNS, and that's or at least that's one of the things, and that's what's caused the problem. In this case. And there's nothing you can do about it at the bottom of the triangle of the pyramid. There's nothing you can do about it there. You can be as resilient as you like. You can put all your stuff in another availability zone, but the problem is going to be that at the top of that pyramid is a service that you've got no control over. And if that falls over, which it obviously did, the whole thing is gone. You can be in 10 availability zones in the same region, but it's not going to help you.
So you need it in another region.
Exactly.
You need it in another region.
But then that's the joke that I made on one of the LinkedIn posts, that we said that, the CTO and CIO tell the CEO how much it's going to cost. The CEO goes to the CFO, and the CFO says, forget it, because it's just so expensive.
Yeah. Again, and this is for another time, is it ought to be the other way around. They ought to know already that this, particular system A is so mission critical that it'll kill our business if we don't do this. And therefore the cost is almost irrelevant. Almost. But it's risk management.
Right.
And
And how many people do that risk assessment?
I mean, I've been a non-exec director, and I can say in certain areas, particularly public sector, I don't think they do it very well at all.
Yeah. So just for the record, I actually did a talk with Saim Saftar on his Cloud Native FM YouTube channel on the actual sort of the technical aspect of the failure. So I'll drop the link in the description for you guys to have a look at that. But just to cover the kind of the technical aspect, so we'll kind of, AWS did a kind of a copy and paste of this massive one paragraph. I think probably trying to hide and bore people to death with with this massive paragraph, all these internal names of the services and scripts that they run to update and propagate their DNS tables. But essentially what's happened, and I'll come back to another point on that, but essentially what happened was the first enactor, as they call it, which updates the DNS tables, took longer than usual to complete its updates. By that point, enactor 2 comes in and updates the tables. It just looks at what it's got and it's going to say, okay, that's all old. I'm going to delete all of that. And it removes all of that. Enactor 1 is still running. So enactor 1 comes back in and is now finished, or is picks up from the delay. And then it looks at the enactor 2 table, which is more up to date than its own. There's no check in there to see whether its own data is now stale because of enactor 2 having updated it, and just goes, oh, that's old stuff and I'm going to get rid of it. And then gets rid of the new tables, the new information, and brings in the stale data from enactor 1 from its own update. And that's what really killed it. And at that point, obviously, that caused all the services going down. We won't probably go into all the kind of who got what and got kicked in the teeth and so on in regards to that. But as we said, the list is long and distinguished.
You just wonder how many instances of that DynamoDB, the Dynamo database were and where they were placed, because it felt like it might have been that particular DNS enactor that was causing the problem, and yet it created a much bigger issue than you would have thought in taking down, firstly, because it affected a lot of other DynamoDB services that probably weren't directly affected by the first failure.
Which is what I'm saying to you. Why is AWS running their own kind of back end, what I would call kind of a trunk back-end system, back-end architecture, back-end bus, whatever you want to call it? Why are they running it on the public version that they offer to their customers? So their traffic is what? Going through the same network as the customer traffic for their own back-end services?
It's a good question to ask.
I know. And the point I made about the first enactor delaying, they still haven't explained why it was delayed. Because they said because of some unusual delays or latency, whatever they threw into that massive paragraph.
They called it a latent problem.
Yeah, but they didn't explain why.
Why? No, exactly. There was no what happened there. So
the RCA for that, the root cause for that, we still don't know. That's not public, as far as I know.
Was there a software or a configuration change that caused that problem? You don't know. And that's the issue with...
If anybody knows, by the way, drop it in the comments.
We'd love to know.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge will always be that there are that many potential areas where things can go wrong.
Correct.
That you have to plan your systems architecture and your response to those in that sort of light. And I just get this sort of sense every now and again that too many people in organizations, enterprise organizations, are thinking it's almost like outsourcing. I've outsourced it. It's on the cloud. It's fine, and it's not.
The cloud never goes down.
The cloud never goes down. Yeah, absolutely. And we've always made the point when I was at Bloor, trying to say to them, it's not a fluffy thing, the cloud. It lands on servers and switches and storage devices wherever, at some point. Stop thinking it's something that is complete, it's almost if it was a cloud, there would be so many multiple interconnection points that there would be no points of failure. There are points of failure.
Yeah, I remember, I think I've quoted this to you before. I think it's like decades ago now, so I can't even remember who it was. I think it was either the CTO or the CEO of Hitachi Data Systems. And I remember one line that he said, and that line he said, the damn thing's got to run on some hardware at some point.
Yeah.
And that's always stayed with me, because I was like, no matter how much you have in your software stack, the damn thing's got to run on something.
Yeah, I mean, when Mark Andreessen did his, bit back in 2011 about software eating the world, people did start to get to that point that, you're having to say to them, we still need the hardware.
Yeah. Yeah, you still need that in there, right?
Still need it. It
Absolutely.
might now be, much more of a, basic level, but we still need it.
Yeah. So, like I said, I've done a Cloud Native Wisdom episode with Saim on his Cloud Native FM channel, so I'll drop that in the description for you. Now, I just kind of want to move on to the LinkedIn influencers a little bit, Paul. I think we've done the enterprise, we've done everything else. Let's kind of just cover off a little bit there. So the first of the culprits was Guy Massey. I can't remember who he is. It's probably on LinkedIn somewhere. I'll drop the links in the description for you guys. But he put out a post, and he was talking about what did he say? He said it was an internal DNS resolution issue surfaced. That's what happened. So again, it didn't really kind of talk a little bit, too much about sort of the details of what the problem is. And immediately, I think that particular post from him went on to talking about, resilience, and you've got to have resilience. And I told you so. You must have resilience in your systems. He did point, I have to say, so I'll give a little bit of credit. He did point to another report, I think, from himself, as he's quoting himself. And he said, I think in that one, he was talking a lot more about the previous event that had happened again in Virginia. And he was warning about the
potential
East Region 1 again having a problem. So he did. I think he kind of probably got it right, but just the response he put in this one was the usual. It was DNS, and then you must have some kind of resilience. But that's not an answer to anything.
Well, in fact, it's a dangerous answer because resilience and high availability are not the same thing.
Exactly, as we've
discussed a number of times. So, and that's the difference. I mean, you could say, is a proper IT architect or a CTO like yourself ever going to take that at face value? But the trouble is that if you get business people looking at it who are not technically oriented and going, oh, we need to make it more resilient, and then the CTO says, but it needs to be high availability, and they go, and you get into that. Well, it costs too much, and I think it's dangerous when we don't describe those particular differences, well. What's the difference between resilience and high availability?
Yes.
You can have a single system that's very resilient until it fails.
Until it fails, exactly. And I think again there was other reports. So we'll come to, I think, David Linthicum's in a minute, so we'll just mention that briefly. And I see you smiling there. But there was also a lot of conflation. And this happened last year, and we commented on it when somebody blamed just generally public cloud for the outage that we had from CrowdStrike last year, which is completely disconnected from each other. They've got nothing to do with each other. And again, there was conflation, I think, in some of the reporting there. And I did point that out to Guy in a response to the post. Or a comment that I put in his post, but I didn't get a response from him on that. Some people liked it. They said kind of, because I was saying, I assume you've got kind of full proof in terms of these two things being connected, and he didn't respond to that. But other people seem to like the comment that I made. So the other one, again, I think I get this all the time from these sort of LinkedIn influencers and shills and what have you, all putting out all these things saying, I told you so, or we warned you last year, or I said this 18 months ago, or 10,000 years ago, whatever it was, kind of thing. So again, David Linthicum put out a couple of posts, and again, it was the wrong terminology. It was all about resilience. You must make your systems resilient to be risk averse and blah blah blah. And again, I just think that was not helpful. Those were not explanatory enough. They didn't go into the detail. They didn't give you a way out. How do you get out of this mess? How do we, architect around this? And the wrong. I was just cringing at the terminology, I have to say.
Yeah, and it can be dangerous in the sense that you will get a false sense of security for companies or enterprises who suddenly say, "Oh, my systems are resilient." Yeah, they may be, but that still, when you get this sort of situation, if you need high availability, you need to pay for it high availability. You can't just make your individual systems more resilient. And so it's too easy to do on the internet generally, in social media generally, is to use a term without really thinking about it. But I do think, that the use of the term resilience as opposed to high availability, particularly in this AWS case, is going to lead people down the wrong path. They're going to spend money making their systems more resilient and still get hit by the same problem.
Yeah, and I mean, I just think people should not be kind of, jumping onto the bandwagon so quickly. And I think they need to be a little bit more measured, use the right terminology is kind of the bugbear really for me. And as we said, we try to kind of go by the book as much as we can, and we use the correct terminology when we can. God knows we're not always right, but we do try and do our homework and not use words like resilience, for example, as in this case. Because as we said, if you just make it resilience, it's not going to work. Put it in another availability zone, it's still not going to work.
Yeah. I mean, I can make a resilient server, and I can take I can take a hammer to it, and it doesn't react. It's very resilient.
Yeah, it's very resilient. Exactly.
If the DNS goes down in Virginia, stuffed.
Yes, exactly.
So because you had no high availability. No,
Indeed.
We can also question how many people take the influencers seriously.
True.
But I don't know. I mean, it could be dangerous.
It could be. Absolutely. Okay, so I will drop the link for the AWS description, that big, massive paragraph page that they try to hide all the details in as well. So that will be in the description of the video as well. Paul, thank you very much for your time, as always.
Pleasure as always.
Now that you're a civilian.
Yes, I did this retired. I did retired, not retired.
Retired, not retired.
Because one of the things I wanted to do was ensure that people who weren't trying to sell me stuff, as they always do on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But you never really retire properly from this business when you're
so much exciting stuff happening.
You have to keep your brain active. Yeah. So no, it's good. It's still busy.
Yeah.
Just not paid for it anymore.
Got to do something about that. Anyway, okay. Sadly, guys, we've reached the end of this particular episode. Also, sadly, we now have to vacate and leave our virtual space. We've been enjoying the green sort of backdrops here, but you guys have been enjoying the cyber reality space that you've been seeing behind us. So yeah, we're going to have to leave soon.
I was going to say, this has been a great experience.
It has.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go back to my office next time.
And adjust
my
your
home
webcam.
Office. Yeah,
and
my
back
webcam.
to adjusting your webcam again, being in the center of the...
And you rebooting the server.
And me rebooting my machine, yes. Saying, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes, Paul. Exactly. All the links for everything that we've discussed, and then some, will be in the description of the video, as we said. My thanks again to the Tech Industry Forum, TIF, for lending us their virtual background, their cyber background. Also to Disruptive Live for actually lending us their studio and allowing us to do this particular episode from their studio. Really fantastic setup. Again, description, so link to the, for all of those will be in the description of the video for you. Drop us any comments if you have anything on what we've discussed today, any suggestions for new topics coming up to next year. So again, I'll remind you of that. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me, and we will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.